Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, great, awesome. Welcome. And actually, it's morning. Maybe that's why you were doing that, because it's not afternoon yet. So anyway, my name is Wanda Allen-Abraha. I am the director of the City of Winston-Salem's Human Relations Department. And on behalf of our department, I would like to welcome each and every one of you here today to our 14th annual Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. We are so excited to see every one of you. And of course, as you know, hopefully everyone has an agenda. If you do not have an agenda booklet that looks like this, they are available right outside the door at the registration table. But as you will see, today's program is presented by Pinnacle, Fairway, and the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association. So can we give our title sponsors a round of applause? We are always excited about the Fair and Affordable Housing Summit each year because we think it's a great example of community collaborations. We have collaborations with government, with nonprofits, with neighborhood associations. We have all kinds of organizations, departments, and groups represented. We also have representation from across the state. We have the city of Durham here, the city of Raleigh, city of High Point. I mean, people are here. Actually, the city of Salisbury. I forgot to mention Ann Little from the city of Salisbury. But we have people from across the state who are joining us today as well. So this is really a great opportunity to learn from others who are in our industry. So we are comprised of housing professionals primarily, but housing can mean so many things to so many people depending on their lens or their perspective. And we will get into that a little bit later. So without further ado, I am going to introduce to you Councilmember Denise D. Adams. And Councilmember Adams is the council person for the North Ward. We are in the North Ward today, here at the Convention Center. And I'm really happy to introduce Councilmember Adams because she also chairs the Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee for the City of Winston-Salem City Council. Councilmember Adams has been very involved in affordable housing projects, programs, and issues here in Winston-Salem. She has been an advocate for fair housing as well, and she has her hands in just a lot of positive and progressive projects here in the city. So I didn't mean to make you laugh, Councilmember Adams, but anyway. So again, without further ado, I'd like to call Councilmember Dee Dee Adams up. Councilmember Adams?
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to make this very short and quick. First of all, greetings to everyone and welcome on behalf of our Mayor, Alan Jones, and the Mayor Pro Tem, Dr. Vivian H. Burke, for coming to participate in this endeavor today. We also have present with us Councilmember Jeff McIntosh as well, of the Northwest Ward. Right now is a pivotal and critical time, not just for Winston-Salem, but for the whole United States when it comes to affordable and fair housing. 10 years ago, someone was talking to me the other day about how this wasn't at the forefront. This wasn't an important piece or an issue 10 years ago. Yes, it was. But the reason we didn't see it was because the recession hit. And it pulled down the housing market. And we were so caught up in, even folks like me and Councilmember McIntosh, our job was try to save the city of Winston-Salem, as we called it, keeping the household. Okay, we got past that. And then all of a sudden, about 2 or 3 years ago, we realized that we were in a crisis situation when it comes to housing. And that we're going to need about 5,500 units over the next 2 or 3 years. Think 15,000 over the next 10 years. But this is not just Winston-Salem. It's the whole United States is in a housing crisis moment with making sure that everybody has an opportunity to have a quality of life and great housing to live in. You know, it's one thing to say, well, you know, everybody can't own a house and everybody, you know, should live here or she'll live there. But everybody should have an opportunity for quality housing. I don't care whether you've been incarcerated. I don't care whether you're ADA. I don't care whether you're black, Latino, Hispanic, single, old. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what side of town you live on. My parents bought their first house in 1964 in the Boston-Thurman area, Okalana Avenue. We lived on Claremont, which is Martin Luther King now. When we moved in the neighborhood, it was predominantly white, and yeah, white flight. Everybody took off because we were the second black family in the neighborhood. But in 1964, my parents, Margie and Jack Adams, changed the destiny and the legacy of their name and their children forever. Everybody in my family, basically, we own houses. We learned the breadth of what it means to own a house and how it affects your quality of life. I would not be here right now in the person that I am if Margie and Jack Adams hadn't bought that first house for $25,000 on Okalana Avenue. 3-bedroom, 1 bath, basement, brick, 9 people, 7 children and 2 adults. But the work that you all do, our sponsors, our vendors, all of you here, organizations, community, nonprofits, businesses, we all, like I just left the reentry program at Haynes Hosiery. It's 3 times the size it was last year, and this is the 2nd year. It takes hard work for all of us. We can't do this without all of you. Government can no longer do everything anymore. It's a pipe dream, but without your hands doing the heavy lift and carrying the water, if we all jump in together and carry some of those buckets, we can make this happen, people. My goal as chair of the General Government, Housing, and Community Development Committee, my staff, the city of Winston-Salem, they know where I am. I'm into results. I don't like to meet and talk all the time. I'm a data-driven person. Everybody knows that. But gosh, people, we got data. We got enough. Let's go make something happen. Let's go create some results that the citizens of Winston-Salem and those that need this housing can see. And they can say that we got it done. So I'm leaning on all of you when you leave today and probably all the other meetings you're going to go to. Let's make Winston-Salem and the surrounding communities as great as we can be. Let's get this affordable housing piece kicked to the curb, fast track, that we do it efficiently, productively, and effectively. Because at the end of the day, the people look to us to get it done, folks. We're the subject matter experts. I want to thank all of you, and I know y'all said, well, she talked too much, but you shouldn't have never gave me the mic. Anyway, thank you all so much, and good morning.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Adams, and now you all see why we did give her the mic. Awesome, thank you, thank you. And so next up, we have the Vice Chair of the Human Relations Commission, Pastor Robert Leake III. Now, one thing about Commissioner Leake is he is another person who has his hands in a lot of things in our community. And so he is a real and true asset to the Human Relations Commission. Commissioner Leake also is the chair/liaison on the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee on behalf of the Human Relations Commission. And so what that means is he is the point person for the commission with that committee. And the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee is actually the only committee that is in the charter of the city of Winston-Salem, meaning this committee has been with the city from the very beginning of the Human Relations Department and Commission. And so let me have all of the members, they're gonna love me for this, I'm already getting glares. So let me have all of the members of the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee to please stand as Commissioner Leake comes up. Thank you, committee members. Commissioner Leake?
Good afternoon. I'm about to take this mic out because I cannot. It's too tall, too short. Good afternoon. Welcome to our Fair Housing Summit. I'm thankful that everybody is able to participate in our dialogue, as well to hear information that you guys can take back to your prospective places, as well to your businesses and banks, as well institutions, as well your neighborhood associations. The Fair Housing Act was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1968, hours after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But the Fair Housing Act extended the basic discrimination protections within the 1964 Civil Rights Act into the housing market, but it prohibits discrimination in housing on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, and the following amendments in 1988 of familial status and disability. So therefore, the Human Relations Commission, as well as the Fair Housing Horizon Committee, celebrates the signing of the Fair Housing Act, as well continue, as Councilmember Dede Adams just stated, advocate for fair housing for all citizens here in Winston-Salem. So I do want to recognize some of my colleagues on the Human Relations Commission. I said they will stand and they can wave as well to the audience. Our chairwoman, Sylvia Durant, Commissioner Jeff Bloomfield, Commissioner Rosalba Ledesma, okay, and Commissioner Sarton as well. Thank you, guys. I also want to recognize everyone in this room, probably if you don't know it, but if you do already know me, you know I'm a very advocate for grassroots and making sure that our neighborhood association leaders attend events of this nature so they can get back, they can come to these events and take back information to their constituents as well. So I want to recognize some of my friends that I've worked with for so many years here in the audience. I'm going to start with Boston Thurman President, member Miss Sandy Stinson. Let's stand up, Miss Stinson, stand up. Miss Mary Ford, Boston Thurman, Miss Diane Fitzgerald, Boston Thurman Resident Council, Mr. Eric Martin, the Big Four alumni, Miss Carolyn Highsmith, Conno Kills Neighborhood Association, President, Conno Kills Neighborhood Association. I think I didn't miss anybody else. Okay. And I think that's it. So thank you guys for coming to this afternoon. I hope that you guys will enjoy the summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lee. And so I've actually got ahead of myself a little bit earlier because I've already told you why we're here. I explained that we're here to share information, and as has already been stated, we want you all to take this information back to your respective organizations. That is the key, because as you know, we can't have everybody here, but we expect those of you who are here to really take this information seriously and share it. That's the best way to affirmatively further fair housing and to make sure people understand the different programs that are out there for affordable housing access. So that's your charge, okay? Now, moving on, the recognition of our sponsors. We could not do this without our community sponsors. And please do take a look, once again, making sure you have these. Take a look at the program, and the last page, actually it's the inside cover page, and you will see our list of sponsors. And so what I would like to do at this time is invite Fairway, PTAA, and Pinnacle to come up and share a few remarks with us. So I see we have Miss Ruth Hudspeth coming up from Fairway Mortgage. Fairway has been a sponsor of the Fair and Affordable Housing Summit really from the very beginning, from the very first year. So come on over, Ruth, come on over.
Hello again, it's great to see everybody. I think if you remember last year, I said, you know, the days can seem long, but the years fly by, and here we are. Wow, I don't know what happened to 2018. July marked 30 years in this community, in this wonderful community for me. It also marked 30 years in the mortgage business. There have been lots of changes in both through the years, in the last 3 decades, but the one thing that has remained constant is we have to help each other. We cannot get there unless we help each other. So one of the things that I want to talk about is how lucky I am to be a part of a company where the leadership from the top down really believes in that. If you get a chance, I'd like you to Google or take a look at the, I don't know how to say this because I'm too old, but take a look at fairwaycares.org and AmericanWarriorInitiative.com. These are two of the ways that my organization, and by the way, these are almost 100% funded by the employees. We give as a branch, people give of their, monthly pay, and they do amazing things. AWI, its mission is to educate, encourage, and inspire folks to give back to our military. AWI provides boot camps around the country to educate real estate professionals and lenders on how to serve those who serve. And we've done 2 boot camps in Winston. We did one in Fayetteville. And at these events, we honor a wounded warrior with a service dog, with a mortgage-free home, helping them with their business, millions of different ways that we have given back through the years through the American Warrior Initiative. And there's some really cool videos that you can watch on that site that will bring you to tears. Very, very proud of that organization. They do grants, home upgrades, service dogs. We actually, our group just bought a generator for a veteran who needed it for his breathing. And it was life-changing, what a generator can do. You don't know what kind of help you can give unless you look. It's, you have to go looking. The other is Fairway Cares. Last year we sent over 769 Fairway Cares packages. We had given over $400,000 in financial support. This actually affected me personally because of an agent I worked with, and one of our employees had to bury a son. And Fairway Cares stepped in and helped with those expenses. So take a look, find where you can help, do what you can do, and encourage others to do it. You are the leaders, and people will follow. When you give, they'll give. And that's the only way we're going to get there.
Thank you, Ruth. And next up, we have another title sponsor, Pinnacle Bank, and we will hear from Mr. Davis.
Good afternoon. I hope everybody is having a wonderful time today. I am. I'm so glad to be invited here today to do the service that everyone is here to do. It's community development. I'm Danny Davis. I actually work out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I actually work the region South, North, and Virginia for the bank. And when I heard about this opportunity, I said from my colleague over there, we have 2 there, so you get to meet those a little later, which is Trey and Marty. They are local. So what we want to do is present the opportunity to the nonprofit. We are into community development. We are so glad to be a part of housing and homeownership in the area. I work throughout High Point, Winston-Salem. I'm coming into Winston-Salem now with your new director. Some may know him, some may not, but actually he's a former Charlottine. So that's a plus for us. We have major projects that we're doing in High Point with the University of High Point. It is something that I pride myself in, and we want to be more of a advocacy here in the Winston-Salem area. So by all means, any nonprofit, down payment assistance, city, High Point, take advantage of your local banks because we're looking for ways to invest in the community, to give back. So if you're not doing that, I would advise you to look into whoever your bank representative here and ask the question who your CRA person is and get involved. Because we are actually here and we will be back and we will be a part of Winston-Salem. And we look forward to each and every you reaching out to us, letting us know what your needs are. Thank you again for your time and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davis, and we certainly welcome you to Winston-Salem. Next up, we have the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association, and we have Mr. John Lowder. Mr. Lowder?
Good afternoon. I am John Lowder. I'm the Executive Director for the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association. We're a trade association for the apartment industry. We cover, as the name says, we cover the entire Triad. We have about 65,000 apartments in our membership. The vast majority is market rate, although we do have some affordable. We're proud to have the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem as one of our members, and we really enjoy having them participate in a lot of our educational classes as well. That's one of our primary functions is education. Another is community engagement and community work. And the reason we're here, and we're proud to be here, is we want to be part of the and. So often when we deal with housing, we talk about or. You know, do we take care of affordable housing or market rate housing or upper end housing? As Councilwoman Adams mentioned, we have a housing crisis all the way around. It's an and problem. We need all kinds of housing, and that's what we want to be involved with. We recognize throughout every community that we're involved in, and some of my counterparts who have associations, apartment associations around the country, every one of us is dealing with this issue. And so we want to help be part of the solution. We need developers and we need builders to be involved. A lot of times they aren't part of these discussions, and they need to be, because they're the ones who are going to build the housing that we are going to put people in. It is not an easy problem. We have a significant challenge in front of us, and we need everybody, we need all hands on deck. We need everybody to be involved, and we are proud to be part of that, and we stand ready to help any way we can. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Lowder. And we've been working with the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association for a number of years as well, so we appreciate the opportunity to collaborate. So thank you for that. So moving on, what are we doing here? As Councilmember Adams said, what are some of the action things that are happening in this community? Now, another thing I hope everyone grabbed, I don't have one to hold up, but everyone should have a successes sheet, as we call it. And it has this yellow block of, yes, everyone should have that. And so you will see some of the examples of projects and programs that are going on that some of our sponsors are doing, as well as some of the other organizations here in the Winston-Salem community. And today, we are really excited to once again recognize an organization for doing outstanding work in the community. And they're definitely affirmatively furthering, but they're actually putting their money where their mouths are. And that is the GOLER Community Development Corporation, or GOLER CDC as we call them. And so GOLER has been doing some great things. I'm not going to say much because we do want you to watch the video. The video really speaks for itself. And so if we are ready to cue the video, we will go ahead and show you why GOLER CDC is receiving this year's Breaking Barriers Award.
Well, GOLER was established in 1998 as a part of really outreach of the church. And one of the things that we were trying to do was build the community around the church. During that time, this was not a nice area to be in, quite frankly. Had gone through many years of kind of disinvestment and just really just a lot of negative things that were going on. So what we did, we hired an urban planner out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We talked to about 300 individuals. These were people from the community and other folks that had a stake in what we were trying to do, and basically developed this master plan. And basically what the master plan said was he wanted to develop a mixed income, multi-generational, multi-ethnic community. Our first project was this building that we're in now, which is our Triad Credit Union building. A lot of people don't realize it, but we actually own the building, and Triad actually leases the top floor for their branch for us. Our second project, we actually did, we bought an old tobacco factory. Used to be owned by Brown and Williams Tobacco Factory. And then we were able to attract a developer out of Baltimore to actually be our partner in that development. So we developed that into 82 what we call luxury apartments. And that was intentional, that we would do kind of what we call our flagship product, you know, at the beginning of our development, just kind of to set the market, so to speak. The next project was GOLER Manor. GOLER Manor is a subsidized HUD program, and this is for seniors that are 60 years or older and make 30% or less of median income. So these are folks that are on fixed income. And the significance there is that we had a luxury product on one corner, and on the opposite corner, we had this affordable housing where the average apartment in our HUD unit was $200 a month. Next door, the average one bedroom was $1,200. So once again, this is our whole concept of having a mixed income community, because what we find is that when you concentrate poverty in one part of the city, it's just not a good outcome, so to speak. We also have done some for sale units also. We did some townhomes. Those townhomes started about $120,000. Once again, affordable, because once again, we want to have some permanence in the community and not just have all rental. Our next project after that, we actually took an old historic property. This was our Craver Apartments. And we call that kind of transitional housing. And the way we describe transitional, these are people that want to buy housing, but either they got to save for their down payment or work on their credit, and then they can move into home ownership. Our most recent development, and I think the one that people tend to know us for most recently, is 757 North. This was the first time that we had incorporated a mix of incomes in the same building. 80% of the units are what we call market rate or expensive, and the other 20%, we call that workforce housing. You know, one of the things that we found was that even as we did 757 North, we found that there were a lot of people that couldn't afford our affordable units. So what we've done, we have a workforce development program that we have. It's called Tech Careers. We're working with people in the community to train them for careers in technology. Because what we find is that is going to be the new economy for Winston-Salem. But unfortunately, many of our folks don't have the skill set to even apply for the jobs over in the Innovation Quarter. So we're working very aggressively from that standpoint. And also what we're doing, we're working a project over in the Kimberly Park community, where we're developing a hydroponics facility. A lot of people don't know that Winston-Salem has one of the highest incidences of food deserts in the country. So what we're trying to do is bring fresh fruits and vegetables closer to the community that need them the most. A lot of people ask us what we're going to be doing next. My thing is we're doing what the community asks us to do. Okay, so we try not to do any work without initially connecting to the community and find out what's important to them. Because if we don't have their support, we can't be successful.
And so you see why we are absolutely thrilled to present this year's Breaking Barriers Award to GOLER CDC. And for the presentation, I would like to call up members of the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee to join me in presenting GOLER with their award. As they're coming up, I would like to really give major kudos to the city's marketing and communications department for doing an outstanding job on that video with GOLER. So thank you, marketing. And they are also televising today's program, and it will be available on the city's YouTube channel and the City of Winston-Salem's website, and probably, on WSTV 13, certainly can't forget that. So thank you, marketing. So, Mr. Suggs, would you please come on up, and anyone else you'd like to come up to accept the award on behalf of GOLER CDC. Behalf on the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee of the Winston-Salem Human Relations Commission in the City of Winston-Salem, we are presenting the Breaking Barriers Fair Housing Award to GOLER Community Development Corporation in recognition of their furtherance of addressing fair housing opportunity and equal treatment in our community.
Thank you all very much. We don't do this type of work to get awards, but it definitely feels good when you get them. One of the things I wanted to make sure we brought our whole staff up, because we don't do this work alone. You know, we have a concept that we develop, and really our strategic plan is really one word, and that's called collaboration. We like to work with other folks, and the city of Winston-Salem has been one of the greatest partners that we've had since the 20 years that we've been around. We started 20 years ago. The founders were Lafayette Jones, Reverend Seth Larte, and myself. And with that, we have had support from the city, beginning with folks like Councilmember Joycelyn Johnson, Durham Montgomery now, and at Scipio, the entire council has been supportive. We're doing things over in the Kimberly Park area, working with Councilmember Adams, and Brother McIntosh. He supports us when he gets a chance also. So that's what we're really all about. And the thing about affordable housing, unfortunately, we've let affordable housing become a bad name, okay? But the reality of it is that affordable housing is something that we should be proud of. What we find is that people that live in affordable housing, they work, they just don't make much money, okay? So we've termed it workforce housing now because of that negative connotation. So those are the types of things that we like to do. And once again, we don't do anything without the support of our community. Now, some people ask us, can you only work in the GOLER area? No, we can work anywhere. I mean, we have partners, and I see one of our other partners, Ujima CDC in the back. They're doing some great work in the city also. We have SG Atkins, which is doing great work in the city. So we need to support our CDCs, because really, they're really the engines that happen in parts of the city that the private developers won't come, because there's no profit in it for them. So that's what we do, and we want to continue to do that work. We're looking forward to working over in the East End area, because I say we won't really be successful until we have development over on the other side of 52 the way we have it on this side of 52. So thank you so much. This is Garrett Boulding. He's our CFO. He takes care of he basically runs the place. You know, I'm out there trying to do other stuff. We have Fred Pfeiffer, he's our board chair. And we have Paris Willingford. She actually runs our tech careers program. And I'll tell anybody in the audience, we actually have a few slots that we train people on Saturdays, but we also do stuff with Forsyth Tech during the week. So if you know people that are interested in a career in technology, see Paris, because we got a couple of spots we're trying to fill now. So thank you so much, and thank you for the award.
And thanks again to GOLER CDC for all of their hard work in our community. Thanks again. Earlier, we were remiss in not recognizing one of the community leaders from Ladera Crest. We have Ms. Naomi Jones with us. Could she please stand and wave? Another community trailblazer, definitely. Okay, so now moving on, we are really in for a treat with our keynote speaker. I have gotten to know Stephen over the years, and I have been, ever since I met him, I've been harassing him, using him every opportunity we have, because he really is one of the foremost experts that we have in this community. And I'm saying the Triad, the state, the East Coast, when it comes to fair housing and affordable housing. And so we're really fortunate to have him with us today. And so Dr. Stephen Sills is the Executive Director for the Center for Housing and Community Studies at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and he is also a professor there at UNCG. And so Dr. Sills' academic research is focused largely on housing, health, and labor as they pertain to minorities, immigrants, and low-income communities. He has more than 40 publications in domestic and international journals, books, and in applied research projects and reports. His current research centers on housing issues, neighborhood-level determinants of health, program evaluation, innovative research methodologies, and stratification. Dr. Sills has conducted numerous community-based participatory research projects and has served as a methodological consultant, evaluator, co-PI, and PI on more than 70 grant-funded projects. And one of the projects was actually diabetes prevention in the Arab American community. He has been involved in pediatric asthma surveillance and prevention, the amelioration of social causes of heart disease in the African American community, and so on. So in Phoenix, Detroit, and most recently in rural counties in North Carolina, Dr. Sills has worked with youth homelessness, delinquency, and program evaluation for health education interventions targeting middle school students. Prior to his career in academia, Dr. Sills was a middle school and high school teacher in North Carolina, Washington, and abroad. So you see, he has a wealth of experience that spans all kinds of sectors. So, Dr. Sills, would you please join me up here and deliver our keynote address for today? Dr. Stephen Sills.
I want to go back and listen to more from GOLER. That was amazing work. Really just phenomenal. I'm going to have to come and pick your brain some. Wanda asked me to make my remarks short, 5 to 7 minutes. I'm one of those people who typically stands in front of an audience and talks for an hour or two, displays some great maps and things. I typically wander around, so this is going to be different for me. I apologize, I'm going to be reading from notes so that I can get everything in this short amount of time. And because I'm getting old, I'm going to have to take these things off. So I was charged with looking at the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Housing Study and Needs Assessment from 2018 and coming up with some suggestions for community action steps. The report was prepared by Enterprise Community Partners for the City of Winston-Salem Community Development Department. The report compiled data from a variety of federal, state, and local sources, and from interviews and public meetings with about 75 individuals around the area. I'll highlight some key findings from the report and as they relate to housing affordability and housing choice, and then make a few suggestions based on innovative solutions I've seen across the country as many cities are struggling with the similar issues of affordable housing. Growth is one driver of the problem of housing affordability. The success of Winston-Salem in attracting new businesses, developing a thriving downtown, retraining and retaining talented young people, and becoming a destination to move to has resulted in a population of just over 240,000 individuals and a growth rate of about 4.4% in the last 5 years. This equates to a need for about 1,000 new housing units per year just to keep up with the current population increases. Increasing demand for housing has led to a residential vacancy rate of just under 6% in the first quarter of 2019. As fewer housing units are available, prices continue to increase. From January 2016 to April 2019, average rent has increased 14% and about 5% annually. Incomes are not keeping up with this price of inflation of housing. The result is about 20,000 cost-burdened households paying more than 30% of their incomes towards housing and housing-related expenses. It's a problem for all segments of the housing market. 21% of homeowners are cost-burdened, and more than 50% of renters also are cost-burdened. Low and moderate income, retired, disabled populations feel the squeeze even more than others, underscoring the need for more housing options at lower price points. Low and moderate income households are squeezed by these high costs and are living in a precarious state in Winston-Salem. According to the eviction lab at Princeton University, there are more than 3,000 evictions in Winston-Salem in a year. That's 9 households being evicted every day. Moreover, there are 2,500 families on city voucher waiting lists and more than 2,000 on waiting lists for public housing. These lists have been closed. There are more that are actually wanting to be on these lists. There's little in the way of public assistance that will address the housing insecurity in extremely cost-burdened families. What new housing are we building? There's been a demographic mismatch in the past between the household size and the unit size of the housing stock in Winston-Salem. We no longer need as many 3,000 square foot homes as households have decreased in size due to empty nester baby boomers, young people who are delaying marriage and family formation until their 30s and having fewer children overall, and more people choosing to live single. These demographic shifts indicate a need for smaller footprint, economically efficient units, and creative solutions such as co-housing, more duplex, triplex, quadplexes in residential neighborhoods, and other alternative housing models, alternative things that we've done in the past. There's another housing problem with important fair housing implications. Lack of housing choice has been a historic issue in the South for people of color. Restrictive deeds and Jim Crow laws that were meant to keep African Americans relegated to segregated areas of the city were reinforced by redlining in the 1930s, public housing and urban renewal schemes in the 1950s to 70s, and now the gentrification issues that we face today. Inequitable growth continues to occur where investments in affordable or low-income housing is planned for already distressed parts of town, while new amenities, shops, businesses, employers, and housing options are designated for higher income areas. Proactively addressing this issue will take public-private investments in mixed-income property developments in high-opportunity areas and strategic use of opportunity zone tax credits and other mechanisms to develop amenities in historically low-income areas. Yet we have to be careful not to create a situation that erases heritage communities or results in uncontrolled gentrification in low-income neighborhoods. Gentrification in Winston has resulted from urban development that does not recognize the value of place in the African American community. It has led to displacement of long-time residents in heritage neighborhoods as African American residents are being priced out of their neighborhoods. This result is in part from systematic devaluation of property values, followed by speculation from investors and rapid development in the eastern portion of downtown. Community-centered investment and development needs to occur in such a way as to improve the options for current residents. Growth without negatives of gentrification or replacement of one community for another is a difficult tightrope requiring intentional and careful planning and full involvement of residents from the community, which I really appreciated hearing in GOLER's discussion. The city has attempted to address housing needs with new multifamily housing and changes to zoning that allow new types of housing. Increasing housing supply will help close this gap in need, but the pace must be accelerated or the gap will continue to grow and more families will become cost burdened. Existing housing stock, both single and multifamily, needs to be improved through the combination of code enforcement, higher minimum standards, use of low interest or forgivable loans for rental home improvement, and aggressive use of federal resources for lead abatement, historic preservation, energy efficiency and weatherization, and other maintenance. Housing size and location, transportation cost, location of amenities and employment, healthcare options and daycare options, good schools and safe parks must be balanced as new housing is created. Continuing changes to zoning permitting, allowing greater density, smaller footprints, more accessory dwelling units, more mixed use, co-housing as an option for unrelated adults are all possibilities. We need more YIMBYism, yes in my backyard, and the mantra of build, build, build at every planning forum and in every new report. Yet we also need protections and recognition for heritage communities. Our colorblind policies sometimes result in more structural racism and sometimes than we had before. I recommend careful restrictions in opportunity zones that require higher percentages of minority-owned business certification, employment of local community members, and planning restrictions that include requirements for affordable housing, health care, child care, healthy food options, and business incubators. I strongly believe that if HUD won't, at the federal level, affirmatively further fair housing, then at the local level, we should do so. Along with this rule should be more tax credits for building affordable housing in high opportunity neighborhoods, and not just a few token units. Really getting creative might bring us employer-based voucher programs, coordination in planning housing that brings funding from the school system, the transportation system, the healthcare system, and large local employers together to underwrite new construction. Finally, planning for housing opportunity requires that we involve residents from all income levels, not just in charrettes and public forums held at noon on Monday in the City Hall, but ongoing interactions that are actively engaging residents throughout the process and with the communities in where they live now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sills. Thank you so much. Can I have you to come back up, please? And I think you left your glasses, didn't you? Yeah. On behalf of the Winston-Salem Human Relations Commission and the New Horizons Fair Housing Committee, we would like to thank you for keynoting the 2019 Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. This is, again, in recognition and gratitude for your service in furthering fair and affordable housing. Thank you so much, Dr. Sills. Thank you. Thank you. And so right now, we are going to delve into the panel discussion as you all continue to enjoy lunch. Very delighted to have with us once again this year, Mr. Dan Cornelis. You will see his brief bio in your booklet, the agenda booklet that you have. But Dan has led the Forsyth County Community and Economic Development Department since 1988. He has a wealth of experience in housing and community development. I heard him snicker. I'm trying to ignore that, but he has since 1988. That's awesome. That's quite an accomplishment. And that's why we're happy to have him to facilitate these types of panel discussions, because he does have a wealth of knowledge and he knows about a lot, if not all, of the topics that we're talking about today. So I'm going to turn you all over now to Mr. Dan Cornelis with Forsyth County. Dan?
Thank you. I'm also probably the oldest person in this room, so that's why they have me back every year. So good to see you. You know, it's that time of year again when you get the call from Wanda and saying we're going to start meeting for the next Fair and Affordable Housing Conference, or I guess we call it the Summit. And it's always good to get with our friends and talk about the issues that we would like to talk about. We think that are pertinent to our city and our county. We get together every year and talk about issues, and sometimes we find solutions, but one of the things I always enjoy is the group we have. We have really, really good, strong discussions when we come up together. So first of all, I would like to introduce our speakers and tell you what topic they'll be covering. The way this is going to work, it's a panel discussion, and we have questions up to 5. We came up with the 5 hardest questions we could think of for each of you. Actually, we gave them the questions ahead of time, so I have to disclose that. But what we'll do is we'll go to one person by each person, and they'll have a question for them, and they'll respond. And so I just want to start out, first of all, without questions, not asking questions, but recognizing who our folks are, our panel. Talking about opportunity zones will be Evan Raleigh, who's the Assistant City Manager of Winston-Salem. Fair housing testing, that topic will be handled by Jeff Dillman, Legal Aid of North Carolina Fair Housing Project. And then the Community Land Trust is Marla Newman, the Director of the City of Winston-Salem Community Development Department. And last but not least is a good friend of mine, Suma Dunham from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, which I will put a plug in for them right now. They're the best housing finance agency in the nation. So she'll be talking about low-income housing tax credits. So those are our panelists, and we're just going to start right now. And the first question I will have is for Evan. Evan, what's this thing called Opportunity Zone? What's it all about?
Well, firstly, good afternoon. It's good to be with you all here and see such a great crowd assembled for this summit. So who's heard of Opportunity Zones? Just by show of hands. So pretty good smattering of hands. So who knows everything there is to know about Opportunity Zones? No, exactly. Well, I will give you just a really quick and brief high-level overview. The legislation has come out. We've gotten some additional guidance on the program from the Treasury just a couple weeks ago. It's in excess of 75 pages in length, just to kind of illustrate how complicated and complex the program is. But I'll try to describe it to you in 60 seconds. So essentially, opportunity zones are a new investment vehicle that was established by Congress with the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. It was part of tax reform, the most recent tax reform bill. And the investment vehicle is designed to promote long-term investment in low-income census tracts in both urban and rural communities across the nation. So that's essentially what the program was designed to do, and more specifically to take what's called unrealized capital gains, meaning that you may have invested in a stock several years ago and you put $1 in, now it's worth $10, but you haven't cashed out, so to speak, so you got $9 of capital gains. So this program was designed to essentially unlock that capital that's kind of just sitting out there, not doing anything, and put it to work for the benefit and betterment of low-income communities that haven't received the level of investment that those communities really, truly deserve, and would be the level of investment that all of us can be proud of. So locally, we have 10 Opportunity Zone census tracts. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead.
11.
Sorry. 10, let me clarify. 10 in the city of Winston-Salem, 10 census tracts that received the Opportunity Zone designation, and 1 that is in Forsyth County, that's in the southeastern portion of the county that also received the designation. And essentially, what that means is that the qualification for being an Opportunity Zone census tract was that you had to have a population in that census tract that was at least 20%, that population of 20% or more that was experiencing poverty. You could also qualify if you were a census tract that's contiguous to a census tract that met that definition. And the task that of all 50 governors across the country was to identify 25% of the qualifying census tracts in their state to receive this designation. So all in all, we've got 8,700 census tracts across the country that are now designated as opportunity zones, which is quite a lot of competition. But we have 10, they're concentrated. We do have maps of them. If you Google Winston-Salem Opportunity Zone census tracts, you can see where they're located. WISB, the Winston-Salem Business Inc., one of our development partners, has a really good map which shows you the assets in them. And I'll just say, very briefly, I'm getting a sign already. Gosh, that's quick. But these census tracts very diverse in location, geography, and opportunity. What we tried to do was to identify census tracts that had great investment potential, which I think if you'll take a look at the census tracts that you will agree is the case. And in the interest of time, I'll stop there, but thank you.
We'll come back for a couple more questions. The next question is for Jeff, and it's this. On which of the protected classes of persons have fair housing complaints been based?
Okay, thank you for inviting me here. So fair housing laws are designed to both prohibit discrimination and to promote integrated communities, integrated living patterns. And under the Federal and State Fair Housing Act, discrimination is prohibited based on race discrimination, national origin, religion, color, sex, familial status, and disability. And then in North Carolina, we have another protection that deals with the siting of affordable housing that says that local communities can't keep out affordable housing just because low-income people are going to live there. In North Carolina, similar to the United States as a whole, historically, most complaints were filed based on race discrimination, followed by disability, national origin, and familial status. But in the last several years, disability has become the most common basis for people filing complaints for discrimination. And in addition, I looked at the data in Forsyth County, and similarly in the last 5 years, 42% of the complaints that were filed in Forsyth County were based on disability, with just 36% based on race. So there's been a flip in the last 5 or 6 years, with disability becoming a much more common basis of discrimination.
Thank you. And Marlo, the question for you is, what is a community land trust?
Good afternoon. And again, also thank you for having me participate with you all today. So what is a community land trust? Community land trusts are nonprofit organizations that are formed to preserve land and its long-term affordability for housing. Generally, the organization that is created keeps title to the land, and they build housing. Initially, most community land trusts built housing that was for home ownership, and the buyer would buy the actual house itself, and the land trust would hold the land and lease the land generally to that home buyer for a nominal amount of about $1 a month for 99 years. And then that way, because you don't actually have to own the land itself and any relevant taxes that come along with the land, then just being able to pay a mortgage on the house itself tends to make it more affordable. This is especially important in communities where housing costs are escalating largely because of land costs, but also in communities where you're finding an upward pressure with the market changing, where in some instances you may have property that is being devalued, and we've heard some references to that earlier, and ripe for speculation. Community land trusts can come in and buy that land and protect that land, protect its affordability, so that those who buy the homes that go on that land can afford them for the long term. Another interesting thing about community land trust is that the organization, that community land trust itself, has like the right of first refusal oftentimes to either buy the land or buy the home, if that homeowner wants to sell, but those properties can be left to their families. If the homeowner wants to sell, and especially if the pricing in that market has gone up appreciably, then there's a formula that says how much that homeowner can profit when that property is sold, so that that new buyer can still buy something that's considered affordable in the market.
Thank you, Marla. Summa, tell us a little bit about the Housing Finance Agency's tax credit programs for low-income housing.
Good afternoon, and Dan, thank you for the invitation. The low-income housing tax credit program was actually created in 1986. It's also called, as the acronym is LIHTC, and it's designed essentially to subsidize 30 to 35% or 70% of low-income housing units in a project. So with the 30% subsidy, you get 4% credit, and with the 70% subsidy, you get 9% credit. And essentially, it's a public-private partnership it started in the Reagan administration to encourage the creation of affordable housing. So the people who invest in, put in equity, large amounts of equity in these projects are banks, insurance companies, huge private corporations, and essentially what they do is they put in the equity, and for that equity, they get a dollar for dollar tax reduction in their federal tax liability. And developers who put these deals together can essentially deal directly with the investors, or they can go through a middleman, and they are called the syndicators. And the syndicators essentially create pools of projects in essentially creating LIHTC equity funds. And then the investors can actually pick and choose which projects they want to develop and put equity in. And essentially you have three criteria. You have rent restrictions, income restrictions, and then NCHFA, the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency's approval. So these are the three requirements for actually funding a tax credit project. And if you go to our website, nchfa.com/rental developers, you can learn a lot more about our program and what we require and how you can apply. And the targeted population is at or below 80% of area median income. So that's in essential.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So back to Evan. We talked a little bit about what opportunity zones are. Tell us how they're relevant to affordable housing.
So I want to spend just a quick second before kind of maybe indirectly answering that question, just to kind of tell you the structure of how this tax incentive works, which I think has a relationship to answering Dan's question about how it relates to affordable housing. So just quickly, I'll take you through an example. I said it's very complex, but I want to try to keep it simple. So it's fun to dream about being a millionaire. I'm sure We got plenty of millionaires in the room. So just say, for instance, you had $1 million, right? You had $1 million of capital gains that you realized, and you invested that money in a qualifying opportunity fund, let's say the end of last year, so December 31st of 2018. So the way that this program works, if you invest that money in a qualified opportunity fund, which in turn invests in a qualified opportunity asset, business, property, stock, there are a number of things that qualify. You get a tax deferral on the initial gain, and you also get a deferral, I'll get to it, a complete deferral on the gains that you make on the gains you've invested, if you hold it for 10 years. So follow, $1 million invested at the end of last year, and 7 years later, what the government says is, well, because you invested in this low-income area, we're going to give you a step-up in basis, which basically means a cut on the amount of taxes you owe on that original money that was invested. So you invested $1 million, you held it in this opportunity fund for 7 years. Your tax liability on that $1 million is 15% less now. So you only owe taxes on $850,000. In addition, if you hold that $1 million investment for 10 years, you get, and let's just say at the disposition date, 10 years, so December 2028, you sell that $1 million investment for $5 million, that gain that you got totally goes away. You owe no taxes on the $4+ million of gain that you got. So that is the reason why this is such a program that's being so highly discussed. It's because the tax implications for investing in these funds is really significant as long as you hold it. So as it relates to affordable housing, I think because the nature of the investors in opportunity funds is a little bit different than others. These folks are looking for the highest returns possible. And frankly, affordable housing is going to have to compete with a whole lot of other types of investment opportunities. And I think it will just be a matter of figuring out how to make affordable housing as attractive as investing in other things that these opportunity funds can invest in. Because again, investors are looking for the highest return possible. So, you know, it's been incumbent upon us to figure out how we can make affordable housing stand out, how we can make the census tracts that we have here locally stand out among all the competition across the country for investment opportunities and the actual locations of those investment opportunities.
So in essence, what you're saying is if you don't make a gain, there's no tax benefit for you.
Exactly.
So you got to find good projects and projects that are really going to be supported with additional funds. So, thank you. Jeff, what is fair housing testing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So fair housing testing is an investigative process to gather information about a housing transaction. And you can do this in any type of housing markets. You can do it in rental markets, in sales markets, mortgage lending or mortgage insurance markets. And what it typically involves is sending trained individuals to try to act as a consumer, trying to either rent an apartment or buy a house or get a loan or get homeowners insurance. And the individuals go through an extensive training process so that they know how to act and how to act realistically. And usually when we're doing what's called a matched pair test, we send out 2 individuals. If we're testing for race discrimination, one will be white and one would be African American. And they're matched in all criteria except for race, so that we can determine if there is a difference, the difference is likely due to the race of the individual. We do testing at the Fair Housing Project of Legal Aid. We do testing for race discrimination, disability, familial status, national origin, and other bases. And that testing is done in all of these types of markets, as I mentioned, you know, rental, sales, and so forth. Sometimes people refer to testing as sort of secret shopping, and that's sort of a accurate description, although the individuals are actually extensively trained, and then after they complete their test, they're debriefed by someone who is able to look very closely at what was the exact treatment of each individual and ask follow-up questions and potentially do additional follow-up tests if we uncover differences in treatment.
Thank you. Marley, you spoke of the community land trust. Tell us a little bit about the limitations of those trusts.
Okay, 2 limitations are, one, that nonprofit organization, the Community Land Trust, it has some limitations on its ability, of course, to control rising insurance costs, property taxes, things of that nature. And because a lot of times the land trust are initially funded by either private or corporate donations or assistance from local, state, or federal government, and those dollars go in to purchase the land, which then makes it long-term affordable, there's not a guarantee that at times they may not have to come back for some additional subsidy because of rising insurance cost or tax cost. Another potential limitation is around the tax situation itself. So in a lot of communities, there's not a standard set on how you value or tax properties built on land trusts. So in a traditional market, as properties values go up, and that means that land, in addition to that improvement or the house on the land, that can escalate over time, right? But with a land trust, because you don't actually own the land, you really shouldn't be taxed on the increased value of the land. And by not being taxed on that increased value of the land, again, that keeps that house affordable. A lot of jurisdictions haven't sufficiently wrestled with how you tax these properties. There are some communities that have done so successfully, but as a general matter or as a standard, that's not been fully addressed. And to the extent that we start to talk about community land trust and other types of shared equity ownership and the like here in Winston, we really want to be sensitive to how you go about valuing the land versus the house on the land so that we can make sure to keep it affordable.
Thank you. So Suma, I'm going to give you a twofer, 2 questions for one. Okay. So the first one is, how much has Winston-Salem and Forsyth County benefited from the tax credit program, the low-income housing tax credit? And a follow-up to that is, how many projects and units have been built in Forsyth County? So hopefully you can answer both of those 2 questions.
Yeah. So since 1996, we have built 2,500 units in Forsyth County and about 1,960 units in Winston-Salem. So it's been, we have put in a fair amount of housing in Forsyth County. And I think if you, as far as benefiting more, I think if the recommendation I would have would be to, if you increase your active lending program, I think you can benefit even more, as far as the applications are concerned. And it's a competitive process, and so that would be my suggestion to you, to go ahead and have a...
So what are you saying is put more local funds into the project?
Yes, put more local monies in the project, or have a program where you can donate land, or have reduced prices for land. That would actually increase and encourage more, because we don't, at the agency, we don't determine where the developers go. So what all we can encourage localities to do is to have an active lending program or donate land or things of that sort that would encourage people to come to these communities and develop affordable housing.
Thank you. I might add to that, the Enclave Apartments. Does anybody know those? Have heard of those? Yeah. That's one of the ladies that is the reason why we have the Enclave, and thank you for that. But that came from, we were able to find some land that had been foreclosed on during the Great Recession, and they had 12 units on it. They were really bad shape. They were being vandalized, and there was room for a lot more apartments. And so we ended up using about a little over $1.3 million of those funds to help a for-profit developer build on that with the partnership of a nonprofit. And we were able to come out with, I think, 68 units out of that. But the blessing still is coming to us because we had 17 extra acres, and we were able to get some money that was left over in the neighborhood stabilization program. And now we're in the process of building another 96 units. So that project and the Housing Finance Agency, thank you for providing us those tax credits, because that meant a lot to Winston-Salem and Forsyth County.
I'd like to add one more thing. In fact, last year, in 2018, we funded 3 projects in Forsyth County, 2 in Winston-Salem and 1 in Louisville. So,
Again, thank you very much. It's, you know, we need a lot of affordable housing. I think the studies have showed that, affordable housing and rental units. And so anytime we can get those funds, they're very valuable. I know it's very competitive too. So, Evan, back to you. How many opportunity zones are in Winston? I think you've already said, you said 10 in there and then 1 in the county. But you elaborate a little bit why and how they were chosen. I think that was one of the processes that was a little bit unclear, and it came out kind of late. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
So again, as I mentioned earlier, we do have 10 census tracts that were designated as opportunity zones for the city of Winston-Salem, and 11 for the county if you include the tract that's in southeastern Forsyth County. So as Dan kind of alluded to, it was a fairly rushed process in working to establish that list of census tracts that we would put forward for the governor's consideration to be selected as an opportunity zone. Every state handled their selection of their census tracts a little bit differently. And the way that it happened in North Carolina, once again, the governor got the call from the feds who said, you need to get 25% of your qualifying census tracts designated. What the governor of North Carolina did was turn that task over to the Department of Commerce. And then the Department of Commerce decided, well, maybe we need to kick the can, so to speak, to the regional councils of government, of which there are 23 across the state, to make that decision on a slightly more local level. I think the thought was get to a closer to the ground level to get that input on which track should be designated. So we, in conjunction with our regional council of governments, devised a list. Fortunately, most all of the census tracts that we put forward here in Winston-Salem ultimately received the nomination. I think we may have put forward 12 census tracts in total and got 10, which was a big win for the community. But again, the reason why we selected the tracts that we did, and by the way, we probably had, by the time all that message got down to us, we had about a week to turn it around, unfortunately. But we did the best that we could. And so the tracts that were selected, if you look at them and you think about the assets that are present in each of them, we have the census tract. There's about 3 census tracts around the Winston-Salem State University area. We have our downtown, which is a qualifying census tract that's included in the area. Several neighborhoods of great significance, Boston Thurman being one example of a neighborhood that's ripe for investment opportunity that's designated. Whitaker Park and the area around Whitaker Park is in a qualifying census tract. Our airport, which is an entity, an asset that we're trying to use to leverage greater economic activity, is also in a census tract. So that was really the logic that we used, looking for census tract that balanced, that kind of had a good balance of great investment potential, ready investment potential, but also need. So that's kind of how we came to the tracks that we did.
Thank you, Evan. So, Jeff, why is fair housing testing so important to our community?
So the reason we need a Fair Housing Act is because of the discrimination and segregation that exists in our society. And if you think back, or if you think about the communities that you live in, right, most of our society, not just Winston-Salem, not just North Carolina, but most of the United States is heavily segregated by race and by national origin. And the discrimination, a lot of the discrimination that we encounter now is not necessarily overt. We don't see the signs that we saw before the Civil Rights Movement where people said whites only, or no Mexicans, or other statements like that. Most of the discrimination has changed from a door being slammed into someone's face to what people refer to as a revolving door, a handshake and a smile and a statement of, oh, I'm sorry, I just rented the apartment, it's no longer available, when in fact the apartment might still be available. Now we do still encounter discrimination that is blatant, and in fact a colleague here, Ed Sharp, who, from Legal Aid, represented an individual in a nearby community where a landlord told someone who was white that she couldn't reside there because her boyfriend was African American. And as a result of that, we did some fair housing testing, and we sent a white tester. We first had them call. We had a white tester call and was told there was a vacancy. Our African American tester called. Oh, I'm sorry, nothing's available. The white tester had made an appointment, so right before the white tester's appointment, the African American went. Oh, I'm sorry, nothing is available. Half an hour later, the white tester goes to see the unit that's available. And so that testing was able to confirm the statement that the individual was told by the landlord that because she was in an interracial relationship, she was no longer allowed to reside in that community. But testing can also uncover discrimination that's not as blatant. We see instances where people of color, African Americans or Latinos, are told higher prices, or they aren't given a discount that might be given to a white individual. Or they're told something that's not available, that, oh, I'm sorry, we've just rented that unit, when in fact there might be an available unit. And so it's very important to be able to uncover and to detect and to deter and to punish individuals who engage in that type of discrimination based on race, national origin, and those other protected classes that I mentioned earlier. And so fair housing testing is an important tool to help enforce fair housing laws, to help us try to achieve less discrimination, and to help try to integrate communities in line with the Fair Housing Act.
Thank you. So Marla, we talked a little bit about the limitations of the community land trust. Can you talk to us a bit what the big advantages of land trust? Why would we want to adopt the land trust model?
So, of course, in addition to the ability to ensure long-term affordability, one of the key elements I think that's very attractive about land trust is this notion of perpetual responsibility. So the community land trust, as that land owner underneath that house, has an obligation and responsibility to make sure that the house sitting on that land stays in good condition, is used as it's intended to be used. And because of that, they actually have the ability to force a homeowner to make repairs if that house starts to show signs of deferred maintenance. So it can actually force upkeep on the homes. It can also come in or step in should that homeowner get into trouble with their mortgage. So they can go in and possibly cure a potential default so that that house does not go into foreclosure and then jeopardize that asset on behalf of the land trust. So that's one real important area, is this notion of perpetual responsibility. And then, again, like I said, that the notion of affordability for the long term. By having a 99-year ground lease and that ability to control the rate at which the homes appreciate, and that appreciation is taken by a homeowner if they decide to move or to sell, really helps. So as an example, with formulas, and the formulas will differ depending on the land trust, it may be set up such that 25% of the increase in the value of that house may be the maximum that can go to that homeowner. And that's a trade-off. And so I will say, as part of that, land trust ownership is not for everyone. So where some people look at buying a house as a means to wealth creation, buying in a land trust situation may not be the best option. But if the concern is about long-term affordability and having an asset that does appreciate, you may not get the windfall that you might in the larger market. You are still able to keep that house affordable. That homeowner can still walk away with some resources. And in many instances, those who sell their land trust property take that appreciation that they did get and turn it into what we traditionally call the market.
Financing options are limited for people.
I'm sorry?
Financing a land trust house, are there lots of options, or is it limited for the consumer?
I wouldn't say that they're limited. I think part of what a number of the land trusts have had to do is educate some of their local lenders on the safety of these as investments. But I think any traditional mortgage lender can lend on a land trust property. They just have to be educated. They're insured. They're insured. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and since Evan's such a good friend of mine, I want to ask him a question that's kind of a little off script. with the opportunity zones, to me, I've been looking, and it seems like it is financing that's looking for a project instead of a project looking for financing. How can we change that, and how can we bring folks that will bring investment through these opportunity zones to Winston-Salem and Forsyth County?
That's a $1 million question, isn't it, Dan?
I was hoping you have a good answer for that one, because I don't.
You know, I had planned to ask you that after we were done here. So I think to Dan's point, you know, this is a program that to date, there are over 300 opportunity investment, qualified opportunity funds that have been established so far. I think it's the National Council of Housing Finance Agencies that has kept the list, is one of the entities that's kept the list. And you look at the amount of assets that these funds are kind of accumulating. It's, you know, anywhere from $1 million to $3 billion that's already been invested in some of these funds that are supposed to be unleashed on these low-income communities. Hopefully we'll get some deal flow. Again, this program has been one that's talked about, but we still don't have the final regs in place. As a matter of fact, we are currently in a comment period on the latest round of regulations that were issued by the federal government. But I think what we really have to do is think intentionally about projects that folks like you and I are aware of that have been on the board, to kind of to shake those trees, to get the interest of folks that we know have been talking about projects. I think it's really going to rely on, you know, folks like you and I, Dan, frankly, to make the connections between folks that have an idea, a project, and the sources of capital that are out there and available to support them.
So it looks like we're going to be spending some quality time together.
I think so.
With that, I appreciate it. First, I'd like to have you give the panel a hand, but we're going to also have some questions. I think we're open for a few minutes of questions from the audience. We've asked the easy questions. Now it's your turn to ask the hard ones. Maybe get a little closer to the mic, please. There you go. No.
How about now?
Yeah,
Okay.
now it is.
All right. Thank you, love. Evan, you talked about opportunity zones. Can you give me that link of those 75 pages for one? And also, are there any opportunity zones, any like seminars that you can come and learn more about it? And two, when you and, I'm sorry, what's his name? Dan. When you and Dan were talking and looking at the great things that the GOLER Community Development Foundation has done, it seemed like there'd be something they could do as far as opportunity zones as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, so I'll start with the end. Michael Suggs with GOLER, I know, has been engaged. We've had many conversations about the Opportunity Zone program, and I know he is really looking to see how we can bring some of that capital, not just to the GOLER community, but just to projects here in Winston-Salem. So credit to Michael for the work that I know he's doing behind the scenes now to figure this out, to figure out how Winston-Salem can get its fair share of capital from this program. In terms of the guidance, the regulations, probably the best, there are a couple of places you can go. The North Carolina Department of Commerce's website, I know, has an Opportunity Zone Fund an Opportunity Zone program page established for those who are interested in tracking the progress of it. The U.S. Department of Treasury, their website, because that is kind of the agency, if you will, that's in charge of the program. And if you're interested, like I said, they are in a currently in a comment period on the most recent round of regulations that were issued. So feel free to go to the website, read the regs. If over probably a glass of wine would be preferable. If it's not light reading by any stretch. And if you're, and I'll also say, yeah, you'll need maybe a couple by the time you get to the end. But if you are interested in learning more about the program more generally, another great resource on Opportunity Zones is a group called the Economic Innovation Group, EIG. Actually, the leadership of that nonprofit organization was really central to how this legislation was originally proposed and written and drafted. They were key to that. So EIG, I think it's EIG.com, they are another authority on the Opportunity Zone program. It's Economic Innovation Group is the name of that group. I believe is it .org? Thank you, Dr. Sue. .org, EIG.org is the website there.
So if you'd like to come to a live thing, this is kind of a commercial for me here, is New Markets Tax Credit and Qualified Opportunity Zone Workshop coming live to Winston-Salem. And it's going to be held at the Forsyth County Central Library on May 9th. It's going to be from 9 to 2, and they're going to actually feed you. So we will be sending out, I think, through emails to folks about this and a flyer. The county and the city, I think, are going together and are one of the sponsors, but the Federal Reserve's putting it on. They're bringing in experts. And I think SunTrust will also be one of the main sponsors. So we'd love to see you all there. We'll send you out an email on that.
Good afternoon. I've got a question regarding the community land trust. What happens in a situation when there is a homeowners association dues that increases exponentially? How does that affect the affordability of that land trust property?
So generally, community land trusts are not set up in communities where you've got homeowners association dues that can just be increased over and over. Because again, the driving force for the creation of the land trust is affordability. So key to the way they're structured and the way membership fees are structured, it's all about affordability. So on average, members of the land trust, the homeowners, pay about $25 a year for membership, $25, $30. So they're never designed to be like your traditional homeowners associations. It's a total different animal. The key, the driving force here is long-term affordability. So that will not be a situation that you'll find with a true community land trust.
So you're saying you got to cut your own lawn then, right?
You don't already?
Do we have any other questions out there? Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Arletha Patterson back here in the back. I have one quick question. When it was stated earlier about the eviction rate in Forsyth County quadrupled by the fact that there's not enough housing, what is the city's plan when it comes to the displaced residents that we're seeing that's exponentially continuing to increase? Like we have these different strategic areas that we probably can pull from, but there is like a crisis where, you know, we're being bombarded with people who don't know what they're going to do. And is there something that we can speak to today, or is that something you guys are still working on? Is there like a plan, an emergency plan in place for those residents?
So I'm going to take a partial stab at this, and I think I'm going to need my colleagues from Human Relations to assist as well. First answer is there is not an emergency plan or response in place right now. I've seen other literature that talked about where Winston-Salem fits into that scheme of communities with high eviction rates. It's one of those interesting dilemmas where you have a private market, and we as local government can't necessarily control the private market. Now, there may be some steps via policies that we could potentially explore around how you balance the needs of those who are in affordable housing versus the desire and the right of landlords to essentially rent to who they want to rent to. So we're looking at some competing interests. I would be more than happy to have a more in-depth conversation with you about that, because certainly in the Community Development Department, we understand and we see it. You know, a big part of the problem is we may have some affordable units in town, but there are many who can afford higher rents but are choosing to live in places that have lower rents. So then that puts pressure on those who don't have a choice but to be in those affordable rents. So yes, how do we balance that? How do we look at mitigating displacement? That's definitely on our horizon. and part of, I think, what needs to be a larger community conversation. And I will say that just a couple of days ago, the newly established Affordable Housing Coalition had its first organizing meeting and talking about what do we do about balancing our market and making sure that people have total access and ability to live in decent quality homes that they can afford. That's the driving force behind that. So I will say that there's work underway. We don't have solutions or answers today, but I'm more than happy to have a conversation about how we get there. And I don't know if Human Relations wants to talk about maybe some of the challenges that people may be having where they're being forced out. So I'll have to defer to Human Relations on that with some of their landlord-tenant mediation work and other things.
Okay, thank you, Marla. With respect to human relations, we of course don't place people in terms of displacement and things like that. However, when people are seeking housing, if they feel they are faced with discrimination, any kind of allegations or acts of discrimination, that is where we would come in. And so you know here recently HUD has issued guidance in terms of people with criminal records, that if they feel as though they are being denied housing based on their criminal record, and if that criminal record, I guess ban more or less, also is tied to a protected class of persons like race and gender and so on and so forth, then we would investigate something of that nature. But in terms of saying, okay, we have some place for you to go, we would have to refer out to other agencies such as ESR and others here locally who may be able to assist.
If I can just add one little something to that, because I don't know if we actually called it out by name, but it's that whole concept of what's known as unjust evictions or no-cause evictions. And I think that is a large part of the problem that we've been seeing, and those are the kinds of things that we might need to look at some policy solutions for. So I actually wanted to name it for what it is unjust or no-cause evictions. Those are the ones that tend to be the most problematic.
Hey, my name's Andrea Kurtz from United Way. I had a question about tax credit projects. Okay. So I know you gave the numbers. It sounded like we built about just over 4,000 tax credit units in 23 years, which seems like a really low rate.
2,500.
2,500, okay.
Yeah.
That seems even lower.
Yeah.
Units, and so how do we encourage more tax credit growth in Winston-Salem? And on the other end of that, are those units targeted to specific populations, particularly low-income folks, and how are they accessed?
Well, as far as encourage, again, like I was telling earlier, we don't determine where the developers go. So as long as they meet our requirements and our threshold requirements, then then projects get funded, and both the 9% and the bond deals are very the bond deals are not competitive, but then the 9% are. So one of the things that you can encourage, that would encourage people to develop affordable housing in this area would be to have, like I mentioned earlier, an active lending program, and both have city and county monies in the deal. That would help, and if you have make land donations and cheaper land prices, that would encourage people to come to this area and develop affordable housing. And what was your other question?
How is it, once you have tax credits, how are they accessed by people who they're being targeted to?
Well, these communities have effective marketing plans, and for the most part, that's how they are accessed. And I'm not very familiar with the way that works because I'm in the financial feasibility side and I don't deal with the marketing part of it. But the development community is pretty active, and they know how to market these projects. And for the most part, there's a waiting list, and they're occupied very quickly in 1 to 2 months once a project has been placed in service. Yeah.
Excuse me, I want to respond to that because we just went through a rezoning request for a Litzy deal on Ronaldo Road, and so as part of that process, I learned some of the qualifications. So if you receive that money, you were tied to renting to that population for 30 years. And those are tested, I guess, annually. So once you get that money, you're committed to that for the long haul, and you're really committed. So Hope that answers.
I would also throw in that this is a very competitive process. And when she was talking about, you have 100 counties that this money has to be spread amongst. And I know for a fact that we have 6 applications in right now for Forsyth County. I think 5 of them are in the city and 1 of them is out in the county. So, you know, the Housing Finance Agency has a limited amount of money. You can only get so many dollars, federal dollars, per person in each state, and they give out all the money they can every year. So it's a very competitive. If we want more tax credit projects, then maybe we need to talk to the federal government about expanding those numbers.
Yeah, for every 5 applications that come in, we fund 1. I mean, and that's how the 9% deals are. So.
Did you say we have 5 minutes, or I'm supposed to stop now? One more question, a short question, one we can actually answer to. All right, that stopped it all. Oh, there's one.
The land trust. My name is Ed Sharp, by the way. Have land trusts ever been used in mobile home situations, mobile home parks?
I'm trying to think if I've actually seen that model. I can't recall off the top of my head. I mean, it sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't want to get it confused with some other type of shared equity ownership structure. So I'm not 100% sure. One thing I can say, though, increasingly, we're finding some land trusts, including the one in Durham, is actually looking at doing rehab of existing homes. So they'll buy those properties and put those properties in a land trust, rehab the properties, and then resell them. And then the one in Durham is also experimenting with something that I'm really intrigued about, and that is doing rental housing, multifamily rental. So they actually developed a property called, I think it's like Bright Horizons or something of that nature in Durham. And so as time has gone by, we're starting to see experiments with different types of structures. So single family ownership, acquisition, rehab, resale, now some multifamily rental. And so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we could find a similar situation. And it was interesting is when you think about a lot of mobile home parks, in some respects, they're similar to a land trust because you don't own the underlying ground. You're paying a lease, and you own your unit. So they're already kind of similarly situated, but I've never heard one that's specifically called a community land trust. But I'd be interested to see if there's actually one out there.
I would tell you this, that there has been efforts by CFED. They changed their name some time ago, and I can't remember what it is now. But something about prosperity. Phyllis, you know that? CFED's no longer there. But what they did is they had a big nationwide effort to do that exactly with manufactured homes. So you may want to look up and see what they've done and how successful they've been.
Okay, let's give Mr. Cornelis and our panel a round of applause. Just absolutely phenomenal information. You all have such a wealth of expertise. We thank you. We appreciate you for your time. We do have small tokens of appreciation for you. I think they are either under your seats or under the table in front of your feet. So those are just small tokens of appreciation for each of you. Thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us today. And Dan, thank you too. Wasn't easy. I know it wasn't. Thank you. So final thoughts, Dan and I always kind of close it out with final thoughts. Again, we encourage you to share the information with your communities, with your organizations, departments, wherever you're from, and in your respective cities, or many of you are from other cities. And so any other thoughts?
I would just say go out and do God's work. Thank you.
Well, that's the bottom line, isn't it? But anyway, thank y'all so much. We hope to see you next year. Thanks again to our sponsors. Thank you.